Hi everyone, Taya here from Quilting Delights, and we are working on another instructional video that we'll be posting to our YouTube channel and soon to be posting on Rumble as well. So don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell when you join our videos, and you can see what we're up to and get notices of what's coming up next. Today I'm going to share with you some ideas on seasonal table toppers. We've got one for every single month. You can jump on our website at quiltingdelights.com, and in the online shopping at the top, just go down to embroidery designs, and all 12 months will be there. We have made up kits that include everything you need to stitch out and finish a table topper, including the binding. So this is a circle. It's a circular table topper, and we have, this happens to be for February. We're going to show you a little bit about the Christmas one today. But every one of our kits includes the cutout appliques with fusible webbing on the back. It includes the embroidery designs to stitch these out. It includes the binding already made in bias form and ready to put on. The only thing that and it includes the backing. And the only thing that you have to do is have an embroidery machine that will allow you to stitch these down. You don't necessarily need an embroidery machine if you just want to put them down with the fusible webbing, but I think the embroidery adds a little bit of pizzazz to it. And the other thing that's particularly useful is the Sew Steady wish table that we are featuring right now for $199. This is a fabulous table. It's any brand machine. It's not just Bernina, although that's what I sew on. And it has a tray table for all that clutter. We call it stuff. There are other words for it, but I like having all my stuff in here, my bobbins and everything. And it includes this really cool tool called a circle tool. And we're going to show you how to use that today. This circle tool will help you make up to 30-inch round circles or table toppers. You can make them small, you can make them large, and it's fun for projects like this. Sew Steady has a video out on this right now, and this is, it starts with the circle, and then it turns into a Christmas tree napkin. I can never remember how to fold these again. Anyway, this circle tool is fabulous. It does a really amazing job, and I came up with these table toppers because I like to make table toppers, but I hate putting binding on in the round. And so we're going to show you how to mark your work, mark your table topper, how to embroider and set it up, or set it up for embroidery, and then you're going to go embroider, and then we're going to come back and we're going to show you how to put the binding on. So let me show you how the setup on this works first. The first thing that you need is a tape measure, and we're going to measure from the center needle position for right now. I'll show you why that can change a little bit. Let me just move my needle back to center here. We're going to start from the center. This little tool has a rubber it's basically a rubber stopper over the needle, and I would suggest you leave that on until we figure out where we're going to position this. There are two little spikes that go down, and they're going to line up in these holes. And since we're making a 20-inch table topper, we want this pin to be at 10 inches from the needle. So I am leaning towards, I'm just going to lean it over here a little bit, see how it just pops in, and I'm just a little bit off from the center of the pin, and it doesn't really matter too much, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle position all the way to the right, and when I do that, amazingly, it lines up at the 10-inch mark. So having it at the far right was just kind of a funny thing I did to start with, and then it ended up being a really great thing, and you'll see that when we go to put the binding on. So we're going to line that up all the way to the right, and our tape measure is going to be at 10 inches. That's going to give us a 20-inch circle. 20-inch table topper. So our kits are set up with 22.5-inch squares, so you've got plenty of room to work with. Now, these pins are in the slots, but I like to put a piece of blue tape on them just to secure them and make sure that they're not going anywhere, because we are going to move our table around. So I put two pieces of blue tape down, and then I can take my pin, my rubber stopper off. Put this someplace safe. Oh, you know what? I'll put it in my little tray table. If you lose those, you can just get an eraser from a mechanical pencil, and that works really well too. So I just tossed it in the drawer here for a second because we're going to position our fabric. Now this piece of fabric has already been put together with Shape Flex and with fusible fleece. I've fused all of those together. I used my Mary Ellen's Best Press to pre-shrink the fabric and get a nice stiffness to it. You want to have all of these layers together to give some stability when we're sewing this circle. I just folded it in fourths, and I've already sewn the circle, but I'm going to show you how to sew it again. I folded it into fourths, and I put a piece of tape on here because we're going to want that as a reference point later. I put a piece of blue tape on here, and I put an X on it, and now I'm going to position that X right on the center. So now it's in the center. And don't forget to put the rubber stopper back on. And that's for safety. We just want to make sure that we don't have any accidents and no one gets hurt. Okay, so I have my machine set up. Now on the Berninas, you can actually, what's kind of fun about this is you can actually just use the green button to sew with. So I'm going to drop my foot. I'm not using my foot pedal. And when you hit go with the green button, I'm going to slow it down just a little bit, but I'm hands-free sewing, and this is the coolest thing in the world. So all I'm doing is just sewing around in a circle, letting it do its thing. Because the fabric has been stabilized and it's really stiff with the layers and the Mary Ellen's Best Press, this will just sew around in a circle on its own. I've got the dual feed going to keep it nice and tidy, but you can see this will sew a circle all by itself. I think this is so cool. I just love it. I just love it. So I'm not using my foot pedal. I just hit go, and when I'm at the other end of the circle, I'm going to hit the button and it's going to stop. I am using just the default setting for the number 1 stitch. It's nice and tight and I don't have to worry about it. It takes less than a minute to go around in a circle, and I think that is pretty darn cool. So here we are coming back up on the end, or on the start, and I'm going to stop it. So we've drawn our circle, and we're going to take this and go over to our table, and we're going to do our marking and set up for embroidery. Then you guys are going to do your machine embroidery on your own, and I'm going to see you back here at the sewing machine in just a few minutes. Hi everybody, we're back at our workstation now, and I'm going to show you how to set up these circles to do your machine embroidery on these table toppers. It will take you back to 7th grade when we had to learn some math, and hopefully this will be a fun little project. The circle that we've done with our wish table is a 20-inch circle. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our Quilter Select ruler, and I want you to notice that there are dotted lines going both directions, and one set of lines is at 30, that's 30 degrees, another set is at 45, that's 45 degrees, and another set is at 60, that's 60 degrees. So how these work for you, if you have a circle and you want to place 8 pieces on the circle, 360 degrees is a circle. 360 divided by 8 pieces, that's how many trees we're going to put on this particular one. 360 degrees divided by 8 pieces means that we have to draw our lines on the 45-degree angle. So I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a second. If we wanted to put 12 trees on and it was 360 degrees, we would use the 30-degree line. But we're going to use the 45-degree line today because we want to place 8 different ones. Now when I took this off of my wish table over at my machine, I put a little mark at the center, and that's what we're going to work from. The first thing you're going to do, it doesn't matter what direction it is, the first thing we're going to do is draw a straight line all the way across through the X that we had in the middle. Then I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to mark it. I'm going to set it up so that it's perpendicular. So I've picked a line on my ruler and lined it up exactly on the line that I drew first, and I'm going to draw my second line. So now it looks like a big pizza with some very big slices, and we need to get these slices down a little bit smaller. I'm going to take my ruler, and remember I showed you the 45-degree line. I'm going to take that line and I'm going to set it up exactly on the first line that I drew. And it's going to go through the center. So just look at the video and see how it's positioned. And we're going to draw that line now all the way across. And once you get most of it drawn, then you can just move your ruler up and pick up the rest of that little bit that needs to be drawn. So don't worry about the ruler being all the way across the circle. You just need it on a good portion of the circle. Now I'm just going to flip it because you'll notice that that 45-degree line is in two locations, and the edge of the ruler down here is crossing over in the center. And I just have my 45-degree line lined up with the first line that I drew, and I'm going to draw it all the way across this way as well. That's going to give us 8 different positioning lines to do our machine embroidery. Now, if you'll notice, I'm using the Quilter Select ruler, and one of the reasons I love these Quilter Select rulers is because they have a non-skid on the back. So I don't have to work as hard to hold it in position to get these lines really straight. So now we have 8 different lines. Now it looks like a pizza. We have 8 different lines that are all 45 degrees from each other. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to check out where we're going to position our trees. So we know we want them to go around this way, but these are machine embroidered. If you're doing the machine embroidery, you're going to set these up to do your machine embroidery exactly 1.5 inches off the bottom. So when I digitized the embroidery for these machines, I put the first stitch of the embroidery right here at the bottom of the tree so that we would have a way to line it up on the lines that we've drawn. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a line 1.5 inches up. I'm just going to put a little mark, and that's going to help me when I go to set these up. So 1.5 inches all the way around. Doesn't take any time at all. And as we've learned with all projects, setup takes more time than anything. And so if we set this up correctly, we'll spend less time taking it out or having to redo it. So I want to give you some good instructions and some good information on how to put these together so that you only have to do everything one time. So I'm marking 1.5 inches up from the bottom, and I'm going to show you a couple of handy tricks on machine embroidery next so that you can do these very quickly and very easily. I'm using a friction pen on this particular one because it's a dark color. But there are other pens out there. For example, if you're doing a dark color, Clover has a white liquid pen. The funny thing about this one is you'll draw it onto the dark fabric, and then it takes about 30 seconds for the color, the white, to come up. So don't overmark it because you'll just use up your pen. The next one that we've been using a lot is the Sew Line Duo marker and eraser. And this is great. This is a great system because you're going to mark it with the pink pen, and then when you're all done, you're just going to take the eraser and take those lines out. The friction pen, of course, is removable by ironing it when you're all finished. So on a lighter colored fabric, I like using the friction pen. Okay, now that we have our 1.5 inch mark set, I'm going to take and pin these in place so that I can make sure I've got all of them together. And now is the time that you want to think about setting up your hoop with your stabilizers. And when we set up our hoop with stabilizer, for this particular project, I like to use what's called poly mesh, which is it's a cutaway, but it's a very, very lightweight cutaway. We're going to be doing a blanket stitch around these, and a blanket stitch is a fairly lightweight stitch out. And the problem is if you put tearaway, if you use tearaway, which I know some people like to do, if you use tearaway stabilizer and you tear it away on a blanket stitch, you're very likely to tear out your stitches. So this poly mesh is very lightweight and allows for you to just cut around it and leave it in your project. Now you notice I'm pinning these, but I'm not ready yet to put them down. So I have not peeled the paper off the back, but you do want to make sure that when you go to embroider these that you remember to peel the paper off. So I've set these all up, and I am going to show you now how I put them in my hoop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hoop, and I've put my poly mesh in it. And regardless of what embroidery machine you're using, you always want to make sure that your arrows line up at the bottom. Arrows line up at the bottom. And you also, in this particular stitch out, you're going to use your template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my template and I'm going to line it up down the center line of the template. I'm going to line up with the center line here. Now I know where my first stitch is. It's right here. So I know that this is how I'm going to position it in my hoop. So I would take my 505 spray and I'll spray it out. I'll spray the hoop out, the stabilizer with 505, set it down, position my template over the straight line, and then I'm going to pick it up with the template in place, slide my hoop underneath, making sure it's the right direction, and position this in the hoop, and it will stick in there. Most of you have a basting stitch, which I would encourage you to use. I'm not going to do the embroidery here because that's a whole nother lesson. I want to get to the actual making of the table topper. The other thing I want to share with you is that if you don't have an embroidery machine, you don't need to embroider it. You can just put your Christmas trees or other table topper ornaments onto your table topper, iron them down, and then just quilt through the whole process. You don't necessarily have to have an embroidery machine, but the embroidery process is kind of fun. For example, on the Christmas one, we not only blanket stitch the Christmas tree, but we put some red ornaments on it, and we put a star at the top of each of the trees. So it adds a little more definition and a little more zing to the whole picture. So you're going to put this in here. Now notice I'm not unpinning any of these. I'm not hooping this project. I don't want you to hoop this. I want you to learn how to lay the embroidery in the hoop, use your basting box, and then go from there. The other thing I want to bring near and dear to your heart is that the first stitch out of this design is a crosshair. And that crosshair is only for positioning at the mark that you made on your table topper. You're going to skip it. Don't stitch out the crosshair. Because if you stitch out the crosshair, you're going to have to pick out the crosshair. Ask me how I know this. Usually on every project, I forget at least once not to stitch the crosshair out, and then I have to unstitch it. So you're not going to stitch the crosshair. It's only for positioning the design onto your table topper when you put it in your machine. So you're going to skip past the crosshair, and then you're going to put your green thread in, and it's going to stitch an outline of the tree. Then you're going to take your paper off the back. Don't forget to take the paper off the back, because if you stitch this down with the paper on it, it's going to crinkle, and we don't want it to crinkle. We actually want the fusible webbing that we have put on the back here to iron down. So we're going to stitch out the outline. You're going to take this off. You're going to stitch out the outline, peel the paper off the back, lay it down, and then the best tool that I have found for doing appliques, I absolutely love it, is my little Dritz iron. It's called the Mighty Steam Iron. And I don't necessarily use the steam part of it, but it's the perfect size for in the hoop appliques. And so I can iron this down, making sure that I'm matching up the lines where the tree is. And then once it's down, I'm going to go ahead and stitch the blanket stitch. I'm going to put my red ornaments on, and then I'm going to put my star at the top of my Christmas tree. And I'm going to do that 8 times. And once you get that part done, it just comes alive. From there, we're going to go back to our sewing machine, and we're going to use the stitch regulator or free motion quilting, depending on what machine you have, and we're going to quilt all of the background on your table topper. At that point, don't forget to put the back on, because we need to quilt through all the layers, including the backing. So we're going to set that up, and then I'm going to go back over to my machine and show you how to put the binding on, which is the fun part.